My son once told me that this boy would destroy his future. He said it very calmly, as if he were explaining a financial decision, not walking away from his own child. I still remember the day they left the boy at my doorstep, saying it would be just a few months. But those few months turned into 16 years. My name is Richard Miller. I am 66 years old. I live on a pension, and I raised my grandson with everything I had, even when I wasn't sure whether I was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And then one day, when the boy had grown into a wealthy adult, his biological parents came back and said they had rights. Before I continue, I want to ask you one thing. If you were in my position, what would you do? And if you are listening to this story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Before we go deeper into this story, my name is Richard Miller. I am 66 years old. I am not a special person, and I never thought my life would become a story for others to listen to. I worked nearly 40 years in the public school system, starting as a maintenance worker and eventually becoming a facilities manager. It was steady work, not glamorous, but enough to raise a family, pay the mortgage on time, and sleep peacefully each night, knowing I had done my duty. When I retired, my wife Eleanor and I lived on our pension and Social Security. In total, about $2,100 a month. Not abundant, but not lacking either. We lived in a small house in the Midwest, where people still greet each other in the morning and know one another's names across generations. Our life at that time was very clear. I made coffee in the morning. Eleanor prepared breakfast. We went to church on weekends and occasionally watched our grandson when our son was busy. My son, Jason, is our only child. I raised him with the belief that if you work hard and live decently, this society will not abandon you. Jason grew up smart, quick, and ambitious. He was not like me, and I never saw that as a bad thing. He worked in sales, always talking about goals, targets, and personal image. He wanted more than I ever had, and I respected that. Jason's wife, Amanda, is a practical person. She works in real estate, speaks concisely, and thinks quickly. From the day they got married, I noticed that the family began to operate differently. Everything was measured in plans and costs, in long-term benefits. But that was how many young families lived where I was, and I did not interfere. I believe that each generation has its own way of choosing. When Amanda became pregnant, Eleanor and I were overjoyed. We bought a small crib in advance and repainted the spare living room to make it a room for the baby. I thought I already knew how the rest of my life would unfold. Being a grandfather, watching my grandchild, mowing the lawn, fixing small things, and accepting old age calmly. I had no idea that this was the last time my life would ever be that simple. My grandson, Noah, was born on a March morning. The delivery had no serious complications. The doctor said everything was fine. Jason and Amanda held their son, took photos, posted them on social media, and wrote the familiar lines about a new chapter in life. At that time, none of us thought that anything unusual would happen. But when Noah was a little over 1 year old, Eleanor was the first to notice that something was different from other children. He rarely made eye contact. When his name was called repeatedly, he did not turn his head. He did not point, did not babble, did not respond to the interactive games Eleanor had once played with Jason when he was young. I thought simply that every child develops at a different pace. Where we lived, we were always taught not to rush to label children. Jason and Amanda began to worry, but in a very different way. They read documents, watched videos, consulted doctors, but every conversation quickly returned to the same question. How will this affect the future? I heard them talk about therapy costs, about special schools, about having to adjust their work. I did not hear them talk about what Noah needed at that moment. When Noah was 3 years old, the doctor officially diagnosed him as being on the autism spectrum, level 2. That meant he would need long-term support, especially with communication and social skills. The doctor spoke very directly. It was not the end, but it was a long road that required patience and commitment. Jason was silent throughout the consultation. Amanda took extensive notes. On the way home, no one said anything. A few weeks later, I began to notice changes. They visited less often. When they did come, Amanda frequently checked her phone. Jason talked more about work pressure, about how they were not ready for changes of that magnitude. One evening, Jason said something to me that I have never forgotten. He said in a very calm voice that they were not sure they could raise a child like that and still keep the life they had planned. He did not cry. He was not angry. He spoke as if he were presenting an economic calculation. I did not respond right away. Where we lived, we often avoided emotional confrontation within the family. I only said that Noah was his son and that no child was a failed plan. Jason did not argue. He simply looked down at the table, as if the matter had already been decided long before. A few months later, they brought Noah to Eleanor's and my house. They said it was only temporary, so they could get things settled. There were no documents, no legal agreement, just a small bag of clothes, a few toys, and a 4-year-old child who did not understand why his parents left and did not come back the next day. At that time, I still believed they would return. I believed in family, I believed in words, and I believed there were boundaries a father would never cross. I was wrong. Jason called me on a weekday afternoon. His voice sounded tired but firm, like someone who had thought things through long enough and was now taking the final step. He said that he and Amanda needed some time to stabilize their lives, and that Noah would stay with Eleanor and me for just a few months. He said it quickly, without pausing long enough for me to ask anything else. They arrived the next morning. They did not bring much with them. Amanda set Noah down on the living room floor, placed a small bag of clothes and a few old toys beside him. Jason stood near the door, said a few things about work, about pressure, about how they needed space to sort everything out. No one mentioned a return date. No one asked whether we agreed. The story was told as if everything had already been decided. Noah held tightly to Eleanor's hand. He did not cry. He just looked around the room as if trying to memorize a new place. I stood there listening, waiting for Jason to say the most important thing. But it never came. There was no clear promise, no plan, only the repeated phrase, just a few months. No documents were signed. There was no serious conversation about responsibility or a timeline. I did not ask for one because I believed this was a family matter and that they would keep their word. Eleanor began cleaning out the spare living room, setting up a small bed for Noah, as if this were only temporary, as if everything would eventually return to where it belonged. The first week passed in silence. Amanda called once, asking whether Noah was eating well. Jason sent a text asking if we needed them to send more money. I said we did not. I still believed they just needed time. I still thought no one abandons their child simply because things are difficult. A month went by. There were no visits. The calls became less frequent. When I took the initiative to send messages updating them on Noah, the replies were usually short and delayed. There were no follow-up questions, no sign that they were preparing to take their son back. Eleanor began taking Noah to therapy regularly, rearranging her schedule around him. Those small changes happened so naturally that I did not realize they were becoming permanent. 3 months passed. Noah stopped asking about his parents. He adjusted to the new routine, to me taking him to school every morning, to Eleanor picking him up every afternoon. What unsettled me the most was not Jason and Amanda's absence, but the way that absence slowly became normal. I called Jason after 6 months. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. He said they still were not ready, that things were more complicated than they had expected. When I asked whether they planned to bring Noah home, he was silent for a moment and then said they needed more time. I heard no commitment in that answer, only a delay, spoken very gently. A year after they left Noah with us, I realized there was no one left to call. Messages went unanswered. Calls were not picked up. There was no explanation, no argument, just a long stretch of emptiness, long enough for everything to change. Eleanor and I never sat down and decided that we would become Noah's guardians. That did not happen in any single clear moment. It happened slowly, through therapy appointments, prescriptions, and every form I signed in place of his parents. By the time I realized I had taken on that responsibility, there was no other choice left. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Eleanor asked me softly, "What if they don't come back?" I did not answer right away. I looked around the house at the small backpack by the door, at Noah's schedule taped to the refrigerator. The answer had been there for a long time. I just had not wanted to admit it. We did not chase after them. We did not look for a lawyer. We did not make a scene. We simply kept doing what needed to be done the next day. But that very continuation made everything irreversible. When you care for a child long enough, when you become the only people who show up consistently in their life, you are no longer just helping out. You become the foundation they rely on. The day they left did not look like abandonment, but each passing day afterward turned the words "just a few months" into a decision with no way back. And Eleanor and I stepped into that role without choosing it, simply because if we did not, there would be no one else to do it. The first day I took Noah to therapy, I brought a stack of papers thicker than I expected. Appointment slips, evaluation forms, lists of questions. I sat in the waiting room, watching the wall clock move more slowly than usual. There was no dramatic moment, just back-to-back appointments, forms that needed signing, and brief statements from specialists about what needed to be done next. Everything was very clear, very specific, and very expensive. Therapy was the foundation: language, behavior, social skills, several sessions a week, each with its own fee. Insurance only covered part of it. I learned how to read the benefits chart the way you read the manual for a complicated machine. What was covered, what was not, what required prior authorization. There were evenings when I sat at the kitchen table, adding and subtracting numbers, not to complain, but to know what I could and could not do the next day. I cut the first expenses quickly. No more weekend trips. No more eating out. The old car was maintained just enough to run, nothing more. I gave up buying the printed newspaper and switched to reading free news. Those small things, added together, created the space needed to pay for the next therapy sessions. I did not see it as sacrifice. It was simply what you do when a child depends on you. Eleanor changed in a different way. She did not talk much about money. She looked at Noah's schedule, then at the kitchen. Eleanor had always baked for the family, for the church, for neighbors. At first, she only said she would make a few extra batches of pastries to bring to weekend events. No grand plan, no ambition, just doing what she did best. The first batches were sold at community gatherings. A folding table, a few trays, a handwritten sign with prices. Eleanor stood there, talking to each person, explaining each kind of pastry. She did not try to impress anyone. She only answered when asked. I stood nearby, watching Noah, giving him quiet space when it got crowded. The money was not much, but it was enough to pay for one therapy session. That was enough. We began to live on a very steady rhythm. Mornings, I took Noah to school. Afternoons, Eleanor picked him up. On therapy days, we went earlier. Evenings, dinner on time, then reading, then sleep. That regularity did not just help Noah, it helped us too. When everything else was uncertain, the schedule became an anchor. Special education was a world of its own. Meetings with the school, building individualized plans, adjusting goals and stages. I learned to listen more than I spoke. Eleanor took careful notes. Not every meeting left us feeling progress. There were times we left the room with more questions than answers. But we came back the next week, and the week after that. There were no leaps forward, only very small steps, but in the right direction. Insurance was never simple. One month the service was covered, the next month it was not. I called, waited on hold, explained everything again from the beginning. Sometimes I had to choose between two different therapy sessions in the same week. I chose the one that offered the greatest benefit, based on the specialist's assessment. There was no room for emotion in those decisions. Only priorities. Eleanor expanded the baking very cautiously. She added a few new items, tested customer response. She did not borrow money. She did not hire anyone. Everything was done within our kitchen. On weekends, she took the pastries to the local farmer's market. I set up the table, provided shade, watched Noah. Some days, everything sold out early. Some days, we brought nearly half of it home. We did not see that as failure. It was simply part of running a small operation. Eleanor's name formed very slowly. No fancy logo, no advertising, just one person telling another. Some customers came back regularly. They knew what time Eleanor would be there, knew which items she made best. The income became more consistent, but still modest. Enough to cover what insurance did not. Enough that I did not have to worry every time another therapy session was recommended. Noah liked sitting in the kitchen while Eleanor baked. He did not talk much, but he watched. He liked the repetition of the steps, the way everything followed in order. When it got crowded, he went to another room. We did not force him. We learned to adjust the environment to him, instead of demanding that he adapt too quickly. Some evenings, after Noah was asleep, Eleanor and I sat together and reviewed the past week. Not to complain, but to plan. How many therapy sessions next week? What events were happening at the weekend market? How many ingredients were needed? We spoke in numbers because numbers made things clear. Emotions were saved for another time. I am not saying everything was always calm. There were days when Noah was overwhelmed, days when therapy did not go well. There were times I wondered how long I still had the strength to keep this pace. But every morning, when the schedule started again, that question was automatically set aside. There was work to be done. That was enough. We did not seek recognition. We did not tell our story to others for praise. When people asked, Eleanor simply said we were taking care of our grandson. I did the same. No extra details, no explanations. What mattered was that Noah had a stable place to grow up. Over time, I realized that the hardest part was not the money, but consistency. Not quitting, not looking for shortcuts, not expecting quick results. We set small goals and followed them through. One new word today, fewer meltdowns this week, putting on shoes faster this month. Those improvements were not loud, but they accumulated. The income from Eleanor's baking gradually became a familiar part of the budget. Not enough to call it wealth, not enough to change our standing, but enough to keep things running, enough that we did not have to borrow, enough that I did not have to choose between two basic needs of Noah's. We do not know what the future will bring. No one promises that every effort will be rewarded in a visible way. But every day that Noah has a routine, support, and dinner on time is a day we are doing the right thing. And when I look back, I see that it is those ordinary days that have built the strongest foundation. Caring for a child on a pension is not a heroic story. It is a series of small, repeated decisions, made with the same goal, keeping things stable. We did not win big. We simply did not give up. And in Noah's world, that stability is the most valuable thing we could give him. Noah was not the kind of child who made adults comfortable to be around. He did not like being asked many questions. He did not respond in the way people expected. When a room became noisy, he withdrew very quickly, as if sound were something that could hurt him. Eleanor often said that Noah was like someone living at a different volume from us, lower, narrower, and that he needed quiet in order not to become overwhelmed. But within that silence, something else was happening. Noah had a capacity for focus that I had never seen in anyone else. When he paid attention to something, the world around him seemed to disappear. He could sit for hours just rearranging the same set of toys into the correct order, not because he did not know boredom, but because he was searching for structure, for logic, for an order that made him feel safe. The first time I realized this was when I brought home an old computer. It was not a gift. I simply needed a device to manage paperwork and insurance. Noah stood behind me, silent, watching every movement. He did not ask questions. He did not touch it. He just watched. When I stepped away from the desk, he sat down, placed his hands on the keyboard very slowly, as if testing whether this thing would allow him to enter. I did not stop him. I did not instruct him either. I just left the computer there, in a shared space of the house, where Noah could access it without it being called learning or practice. Eleanor asked me if I was afraid he might break it. I said that if it broke, we would fix it. Nothing was more valuable than letting him try. Noah learned computers in his own way. He did not read manuals. He pressed keys, observed, and remembered. He memorized the positions of icons, the steps needed to return to something he had already done. When he made a mistake, he did not become frustrated. He simply started over. I noticed that he did not fear failure the way adults do. For Noah, failure was just another state of the process. He did not tell us that he liked computers. He did not show off what he could do. We only knew when Eleanor saw him reopen a program he had previously closed, or when I realized he had changed settings deliberately. I did not understand everything he was doing, but I understood one thing. He was learning, and he was learning very fast. We did not set expectations. We did not say he had to be good. We did not say he needed to pursue this. After everything that had happened, I no longer believed in forcing a child to follow an adult's plan. I set only one boundary. No one was allowed to disturb Noah when he was focused. No questions, no rushing, no interrupting, no turning his curiosity into a performance. Noah hated noise, but he did not hate presence. He liked it when I sat nearby, reading the newspaper or fixing something without speaking. He liked it when Eleanor baked in the kitchen, the steady sound of the oven. Those familiar sounds did not overwhelm him. They formed a background, and on that background, he built his world. As Noah grew older, he began to seek out more complex things. He did not play video games like other children. He liked things with clear rules. He learned to write his first lines of code from free websites online. I did not understand them, but I noticed that he returned to the same pages many times, memorizing every small change. He did not learn fast in the usual sense. He learned deeply. Once, a teacher told me that Noah was very quiet in class, but when given a task related to computers, he completed it quickly and accurately. Not creative in presentation, not trying to draw attention, just doing exactly what was required. I was not surprised. I had seen it at home for a long time. Most importantly, we did not turn Noah's abilities into a story to tell others. We did not say he was a genius. We did not use those words. We simply adjusted life around him so he had more time and space. If he wanted to sit alone, we left him alone. If he wanted to ask something, we answered. Nothing more. There were periods when Noah seemed not to make any progress. He returned to old behaviors, withdrew more. In those moments, I did not push him. I remembered the first therapy sessions when we were reminded that progress never moves in a straight line. I believed that. I believed Noah was also walking his own path, even when I could not clearly see it. I think most of what I did for Noah was protect him from the world's impatience. The world likes quick results, likes labels, likes comparison. Noah does not operate on that rhythm. He needs time and he needs quiet. I could give him that, and I considered it my responsibility. One evening, when Noah was about 13, he came up to me and pointed at the screen. He said nothing. I looked and saw a simple piece of code running exactly the way he wanted it to. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I did not clap. I did not praise him excessively. I just said, "You did that very carefully." Noah nodded and turned back to the screen. That was enough. From that moment, I knew my role was not to be a guide, but a guard to make sure no one broke the space Noah was building, a guard to make sure no one turned his ability into pressure. I did not teach Noah who he should become. I only made sure that when he discovered who he was, no one stood in his way. The way Noah thinks is not like mine, not like Eleanor's, not like other children's, but it is consistent, deep, and very honest. He does nothing to impress. He does things because they make sense to him. And in that world, I learned something important. Sometimes the best thing an adult can do for a child is not to teach them how to move forward, but to keep their path from being disturbed. Noah does not need us to believe that he will succeed. He only needs us not to interfere. And when I look back, I see that it was precisely that lack of expectation that gave him the freedom to develop in his own way, quietly, unhurried, but steadily, little by little. Noah never said that he wanted to make it big. He never talked about the future the way other people do. There were no statements about where he would study, what he would do, or how much money he would make. He simply kept working on what was in front of him, one step at a time, with the same focus I had seen since the early days when he sat in front of the old computer in the living room. When Noah entered his teenage years, he spent more time on the computer, but not in a way that worried me. He did not stay up all night. He did not skip meals. He simply had very long, very quiet stretches of time when he worked without interruption. I did not monitor him. I did not check his browsing history. I only made sure the internet was stable, the computer worked, and no one disturbed him once he had found his rhythm. Noah taught himself programming in a very specific direction. He was interested in how systems functioned, how data was protected, how vulnerabilities appeared. He did not say it was cybersecurity. I only knew because one day he showed me an article about small mistakes that could lead to major consequences. He read very carefully. No skimming, no skipping. I realized he was drawn to things that demanded absolute precision. When Noah began taking his first small jobs online, I did not even know it was called freelancing. He simply said that someone had asked him to review a piece of code or fix a small bug. He did not negotiate. He only accepted work when he was sure he could do it. The money was transferred into his account, small amounts at a time. He did not spend it. He left it untouched. I asked if he wanted to open a savings account. He nodded. We did that very quietly. Noah did not talk about it with friends. In fact, he did not have many friends in the usual sense. He had a few acquaintances online, people who spoke with him about work, not about personal life. That suited him. I did not force him to socialize more than he was ready to. I had learned that for Noah, the quality of connection mattered more than the quantity. When Noah turned 18, he did nothing special. No party, no celebration. We had dinner as usual. He said he wanted to continue working with two people he had collaborated with before. They were not nearby. They met through a screen. He said they thought the same way, had the same patience. I did not fully understand, but I understood enough not to object. What they built was not a loud company. No large office, no big team. They focused on a very narrow, highly technical product. Noah explained it to me in the simplest terms he could. They helped organizations find weaknesses that others overlooked. I nodded. For me, the important thing was not the product, but the way Noah worked, with clear goals, clear limits, and without pushing himself into overload. The money began to come in more regularly, not suddenly, not shockingly. I saw the numbers change in the account, but I did not ask many questions. Noah managed it himself. He had a clear work schedule. He rested when needed. He did not chase anyone else's pace. Eleanor asked me whether we should be worried since everything seemed to be moving so quickly. I said that Noah was working in his own way, and that way had always been right for him. When Noah was 22, things changed in a very quiet way. He said that a large company wanted to acquire their product. No excitement, no nervousness. He spoke as if he were reporting something that had already been carefully considered. I asked if he was sure. He said they had reviewed it for a long time and that the timing was right. I did not offer advice. I knew my limits. The deal moved faster than I expected. There was no celebration, no press, just a signing over a screen and a few short calls. The final valuation was about $8.5 million. Noah owned a large enough share that after everything was completed, after taxes and related costs, the amount left was around $2.5 million. He told me that number as if he were talking about the weather. Nothing more. I sat quietly for a moment, not because I was stunned, but because I needed time to place that number in the right position in my mind. For me, it was an amount I had never imagined would appear in this lifetime. For Noah, it was the result of a long process he had gone through very calmly. I did not hug him. I did not say I was proud. I simply said that he had worked very carefully. Noah nodded. He understood that as my acknowledgement. What surprised me most was not the money, but what Noah did not do afterward. He did not buy a new car. He did not move. He did not change his routine. He continued living in this house, in the familiar room. He only upgraded his computer, bought a better chair for his back, and contributed regularly to household expenses. Not because we needed it, but because he thought it was reasonable. Eleanor continued baking. Her small brand remained the same. No expansion, no hiring. Noah offered to help her build a simple website so customers could place advance orders. Nothing flashy, just enough to work. Everything unfolded very naturally, as if Noah's success was not a turning point, but simply the next part of this life. Some people asked why Noah did not move out, did not live independently. Noah said he liked it here, quiet, predictable. I did not object. I did not hold him back either. I knew that if Noah wanted to leave, he would say so, and when that time came, I would respect his decision, as I always had. Money did not change the way Noah thought. He still disliked crowded places, still preferred working in familiar spaces, still did not speak much. But he was more confident in a very discreet way. He knew he could take care of himself, and he knew that no one had the right to force him to become something else. I looked at Noah and realized that his success did not come from any explosive moment. It came from very slow, very steady accumulation, from not being pushed to move faster than he could handle, from having a place to return to every day without having to explain who he was. We did not inform Jason and Amanda, not because we wanted to hide it, but because it was not their matter. Our life continued as before. Dinner was still on time. On weekends, Eleanor still took her pastries to the market. Noah still worked in silence. And in that silence, I saw one thing clearly. There are successes that do not need to be seen to have value. They only need to be lived with, every day, as a natural part of life. I do not know exactly when they found out. It could have been through someone they knew. It could have been from a piece of information that slipped out when Eleanor received more cake orders for a larger event than usual. It could also have been from some document Noah had to sign when the deal was completed. However it happened, the truth was this. They knew. And once they knew, they came back. The call came on a quiet morning. An unfamiliar number. The person on the line introduced himself very politely, said he was representing Jason and Amanda, and that they wanted to arrange a meeting to discuss family matters. His voice was smooth, professional, and did not mention Noah once in the first 2 minutes. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked only one question. Does Jason plan to call me himself? There was a brief pause on the other end. And then he said that everything would be more convenient if handled through legal representation. They came the following week. Jason looked older than I remembered. Amanda was dressed neatly, as if for a meeting. They did not hug Noah. They did not apologize. They spoke about the time that had passed as if it were an unexplained gap, something unfortunate, but not worth dissecting. Jason said he wanted to reconnect, that he thought it was time for the family to sit down and talk. Amanda nodded and added that they only wanted what was best for the child. I sat across from them and listened to every word. I noticed that they spoke a great deal about family, but very little about responsibility. No one said they had disappeared. No one said they had missed the most important years of Noah's life. They used safe words, words that carried no consequences. Reconnect, move forward, family. Noah was in the next room, working as usual. I did not call him out. This conversation was not for him, and I did not want Noah to witness words that were not matched by actions. When Jason said that he was Noah's biological father, I did not argue. That was a biological fact, but that fact had stood alone for far too long, unsupported by anything else. A few days later, I received official papers. A petition filed with the court requesting a review of guardianship and influence over Noah's financial decisions. The language was very careful. There was no word like demand, no word like dispute, only phrases such as best interests, biological relationship, and parental responsibility. Everything was written to sound reasonable, almost impossible to oppose if read quickly. I read every page, slowly. I was not angry. I was not surprised. I only felt a familiar coldness, like the feeling you get when something you have feared for a long time finally happens. Eleanor sat beside me, silent. She did not ask what we should do. She simply placed her hand on mine, as a reminder that we were not alone. The legal struggle began very quickly. There were calls, emails, meetings that lasted longer than I expected. I learned a new language, the language of clauses and deadlines. I learned how to respond briefly, precisely, without letting emotion lead. Every question had a purpose. Every detail could be interpreted in more than one way. Jason and Amanda did not appear in person very often. They let others speak for them. When they were present, they kept their distance, kept their image. Jason said he regretted letting so much time pass, but he did not say what he had done wrong. Amanda said they were more mature now, more stable, that they now had the means to care for their child properly. No one asked what Noah wanted. No one asked how Noah felt. I was asked many questions about money, about decisions, about why we had not tried to formalize our role earlier. I answered honestly, we did not think we needed to. We simply did what needed to be done each day. I did not try to prove that I was the better person. I only presented the truth as it had happened, step by step. What unsettled me most was not the questions, but the way Noah was referred to as an abstract subject, someone who needed protection, an asset that needed careful management, not a human being with habits, boundaries, and a rhythm of his own. I saw that, and I stayed silent. I knew that sometimes silence is the only way not to damage something more important. Eleanor worried in her own way. She did not say much, but I saw her staying up later, reviewing records, making sure that everything we did could be explained if necessary. She did not change the way she treated Noah. She did not speak about the case in front of him. She kept this house a safe place, undisturbed by what was happening outside. Noah knew that something was happening. He did not ask directly. He noticed the changes in schedule, the calls I took in another room. One evening, he asked me whether Jason and Amanda had come back. I nodded. He asked if they were going to move him away. I said that no such decision had been made and that no one could decide for him. Noah was silent for a moment, then returned to his computer. No panic, no strong reaction, just continuing his work. The struggle lasted longer than I had hoped, not because the truth was complex, but because of how the truth had to be arranged to fit the legal framework. Each side said they were acting in Noah's best interests, but I began to see the difference between those statements. One side spoke of interests as a concept. The other lived with Noah every day. I was not trying to win. I was only trying to make sure Noah would have a voice when the time came. I knew that this battle, whatever name it was given, even would not end with an imposed ruling. It would end with a choice. And that choice did not belong to me, nor to Jason or Amanda. It belonged to Noah. When I signed the final papers of the first stage, I realized that this had gone far beyond a family meeting. This was no longer about reconciliation or reconnecting. This was the past returning, not to repair, but to claim. And for the first time since the day Jason left, I no longer hoped that everything would resolve itself if we were simply patient and waited. The struggle had begun, not loudly, not dramatically, but seriously enough to force all of us to face the question we had avoided for many years. What truly defines a family, and who has the right to decide that when everything has changed so far from where it began? The first hearing was not what I had imagined. There was no gavel, no speeches, just a bright room, a long table, and questions asked in a very cold order. People spoke in terms of records, timelines, what could be proven. I sat there listening and understood that emotions were not forbidden here. They simply were not prioritized. They began with the most basic facts. Who had taken Noah to therapy regularly for 16 years? Who signed enrollment forms, evaluation reports, individualized education plans? Who consented to medical procedures? Who was listed as the emergency contact? These questions were not accusatory. They only required precise answers. I answered with the truth. Eleanor did as well. We did not embellish. We did not emphasize. We simply recounted what had happened day after day. Jason and Amanda were asked similar questions. They spoke about the early period, about how they had always cared, about sporadic contact. No one said they had never loved Noah, but love here was not what was being weighed. What was under review was presence, continuity, whether responsibility had been carried out or left vacant. Their lawyer argued that biological ties carried rights and obligations. Our lawyer did not dispute that. He simply reframed the question. During those 16 years, who had actually exercised those rights and fulfilled those obligations? There was no heated argument, only documents placed on the table, arranged chronologically, enough for anyone to see a very clear line. I realized that the court did not side with anyone emotionally. The court listened, the court recorded, the court asked questions. But the court did not do what many people expect. It did not decide the life of an adult for them. When Noah's name was mentioned as an independent subject, no longer as a child, the atmosphere in the room shifted slightly, but enough for me to know we had entered a different phase. Noah was over 18. That was not a minor detail. It was the central point. One lawyer stated it very clearly, very slowly, so there would be no misunderstanding. No ruling could force an adult to live where they did not want to, or transfer financial control to someone else without their consent. The court could listen to all parties, but it could not replace Noah's will. Jason reacted in a very familiar way. He said Noah needed guidance, that a large sum of money could pose risks, that biological parents had a natural role in protecting their child. Those words would have sounded reasonable 16 years earlier. Now they hovered without anything to support them. Eleanor sat beside me, her hands resting on her lap, unmoving. She did not look at Jason. She looked straight ahead. I knew she was doing what she had always done best, keeping herself steady so as not to interfere with what mattered more. I did the same. I did not argue motives. I did not speak about pain. I simply confirmed what we had done, consistently, continuously, without interruption. When it came to finances, everyone became more cautious. No one talked about how the money had grown, only about how it was managed. Noah had his own accounts, independent advice, a clear plan. There was no indication that he lacked the capacity to make decisions for himself. I noticed very small nods around the table, not agreement, but acknowledgement. There was one moment I will not forget. A lawyer looked at Noah, who was seated in the back row at that point, and said that if Noah wished to speak, the door was always open. No request, no pressure. Just a reminder, Noah did not stand up immediately. He sat still, hands on his lap, eyes lowered. I did not turn to look at him. I did not signal. I knew this was not the moment to lead. The hearing ended without a definitive conclusion. There was no win or loss. Only one thing was made clear, repeated in many different ways. The court could examine the past, but the future, where Noah lived, how Noah managed his life, was not in anyone's hands but Noah's own. On the way home, no one spoke much. The car was quiet but not heavy. I thought about the years that had passed, about every signature, every appointment, every repeated evening. I understood that those things did not make us owners of Noah. They only proved that we had been there. And sometimes being there is the only thing the law needs to confirm. That evening, Noah asked me how it had gone. I said the court had listened. He asked whether the court would decide for him. I said no. He nodded, as if he had expected that. He said he needed more time to think. I told him he had all the time he needed, no deadline, no pressure. Strangely enough, once the law put everything on the table, I felt lighter, not because I was certain of the outcome, but because I knew the boundaries had been set. No one could slip past those boundaries with words or bloodlines. No one could decide for Noah simply because they believed they had the right. The court listened. The court acknowledged. But the court did not decide everything. The rest, the most important part, was returned to where it belonged, in the hands of an adult who had grown up in silence, learned to think deeply, and now had the right to say, "This is my life," without ever having to raise his voice. Noah did not speak immediately after that hearing. He continued his routine as usual, waking up on time, working in his familiar room, eating dinner with us. There were no signs that he was under pressure, but I know Noah. When he is silent in that way, it means he is organizing things in his mind, piece by piece, until everything stands in its proper place. A few days later, we returned to court for the next session. No one required Noah to speak. There was no pressure. But when the lawyer reminded everyone that Noah had the right to speak if he wished, I saw Noah stand up. The movement was very slow, very steady. No hesitation. He did not look at me or Eleanor for approval. He simply stood as if it were the next logical step in a process already completed. Noah did not speak loudly. He did not use grand words. He spoke very clearly, one sentence at a time, the way he always does when he wants to be understood accurately. He began by stating the obvious. Jason and Amanda are his biological parents. He said it without anger, without sarcasm, just a fact placed where it belonged. Then he paused, long enough for everyone to listen. After that, Noah spoke about his life, not in an emotional order, but in a practical one. Who took him to school every day, who sat in meetings with teachers, who was there when he had crises. He did not go into detail. He did not describe hardship. He simply listed what had happened consistently over many years. Noah did not say that he had been abandoned. He did not use that word. He only said that for a very long period of time, his biological parents were not present in his daily life. He said it as if reading a line from a record, nothing more. I realized that for Noah, truth does not need to be emphasized with emotion to carry weight. When it came to money, Noah was very brief. He said that the money he had was the result of work he had done, with indirect support from the stable environment his grandparents provided. He did not say that his grandparents had sacrificed. He did not say that anyone owed anyone anything. He only said that he had been given enough time and space to develop, and that this mattered to him. Noah said that he did not want to argue. He did not want further litigation. He also did not want to completely cut ties with his biological parents. He did not say they were bad people. He only said that he needed clear boundaries, that his current life had a rhythm that suited him, and that he did not want that rhythm to be suddenly disrupted. Those boundaries, according to Noah, were very specific. He wanted to continue living where he was living. He wanted to continue working the way he was accustomed to. He wanted to make his own financial decisions, with professional advice when needed. He was not asking for permission. He was not seeking approval. He was simply stating his choice. No one interrupted Noah, not because they did not want to, but because there was no place to cut in. What he said was not an opinion, but the conclusion of a long process. I looked at Jason. I did not see anger on his face. I saw confusion. Perhaps for the first time, he realized that a parent-child relationship cannot be restored through words or legal rights alone. Amanda looked down at the table. She did not cry. She did not react strongly. I do not know what she was thinking, and I did not try to guess. It no longer mattered. This moment did not belong to them. When Noah finished speaking, he sat down. He did not wait for a response. He did not seek validation. I did not stand. Eleanor did not either. We did not need to. The choice had been stated, clearly, fully. The rest was no longer in our hands. The session ended faster than I expected. There was no need for further argument, no need for additional evidence. The court acknowledged Noah's choice, not as a favor but as an inherent right. I heard the formal language, but I do not remember it all. The only thing I remember is the feeling of the air in the room changing, lighter, clearer. On the way home, Noah sat in the back seat, looking out the window. He did not speak. I did not ask. When we got home, Eleanor made dinner as usual. No one mentioned the court. No one repeated the statement. We ate, cleaned up, and then each of us returned to our own tasks. That normalcy was what Noah had chosen, and we respected it. That evening, Noah came over to me while I was sitting at the kitchen table. He said he hoped Eleanor and I did not feel pressure because of his choice. I said no. I said that we had always been here and that we would continue to be here as long as he felt this place suited him. Noah nodded. He did not say anything more. The most important choice in this story is not how much money Noah has or who was right or wrong. It is that an adult, once considered a burden, stood up and spoke about his life in words that carried no resentment, no revenge, no denial of the past, just boundaries, and moving forward with calm. Noah chose to live with us, not out of obligation, not out of spoken gratitude, but because this was the place where he could be himself, without explanation, without defense. And to me, that is not a victory. It is a very quiet confirmation that the years we spent with him, unseen by anyone else, were spent in the right direction. After all the procedures were finished, our lives did not change in the way people usually imagine. There was no sense of victory, no dramatic relief. The law closed one door, but it did not open a new stage. It simply put everything back in its proper place. What belonged on paper stayed on paper, and what belonged to life continued day after day. Jason and Amanda no longer appeared often, not because they were forbidden, but because everything had been said clearly enough. No one was pushed out. No one was held by obligation. Some relationships do not need to end with a declaration. They adjust themselves once boundaries are established. I do not call that a loss. I call it reality. In this house, mornings still begin with the smell of coffee. Eleanor still bakes on her familiar schedule. No more, no less. Noah still works in his room, the door slightly ajar, the light soft. There is no display that comes with the money or with what has happened. We do not tell this story to the neighbors. We do not need validation from the outside. What we need and have is a steady rhythm of life. I think a great deal about the word family after everything we have been through. I used to think family was something obvious, people who share blood, who share a name. But reality has taught me that family is the people who show up consistently when no one is watching, the ones who sign papers no one reads carefully, the ones who know when you need quiet and when you need a hot meal. Family does not need to speak loudly to prove it exists. Noah did not become a symbol. He was not elevated into an inspirational story. He does not need that. He only needs to live according to his own rhythm. When he chose to stay, it was not an obligation, but a fit. And fit, I have learned, is the most durable foundation of any relationship. Some evenings, I sit at the kitchen table and look at the old calendar taped to the refrigerator, dates that once worried me, that once forced me to count every dollar. I do not regret what I gave up. I am not proud of what I did either. I simply see clearly that small choices, repeated long enough, can shape an entire life without ever needing to be named. The law listened and did its part. But the law does not teach us how to live together afterward. That is not written into any ruling. It lives in ordinary evenings, in respecting boundaries, in the way no one tries to take another person's place. No one won. No one lost. We simply kept our dignity, and sometimes that is enough. I do not know what the future will bring. I do not know whether every relationship will be repaired in the way people usually hope. But I know this: family is not a place where you have the right to demand. Family is a place where you are allowed to stay because you were there from the beginning and you continued to be there even when no one asked. If there is one thing I want to keep from this story, it is its simplicity. No miracles, no fairy tale ending, just a choice that was respected, a rhythm of life that was protected, and a house that continues to have its lights on every evening. For us, that is the fullest definition of family. And if you have listened this far, perhaps you are also asking yourself a similar question, not about right or wrong, but about what makes a relationship worth keeping. I do not have an answer for you. I only know that, after everything, we did not keep everything. We kept the most important thing: respect. For Noah, for each other, and for ourselves.